Well, hey there, people of YouTube. So here I am again deciding to completely expose my feelings about something I love and potentially getting beat up by a bunch of raging hormonal fangirls. Just kidding. That most likely, or at least I hope not, will not happen today because the anime I would like to talk about is a recent obsession of mine and I have nothing but good things to say about it. So if you follow me on Twitter, if you have me as a friend on Discord, or if you're just any unfortunate human who happens to exist in my life, then you'll know that there is one thing and one thing only that I've been able to talk about within the last 2 months, and that would be Given. Now, what is Given exactly? Well, sorry to all the boys out there, but it's a yaoi, which means that there's boys, there's love, and there's boys who love each other. But it's not only about that, it's also about the music. The premise is quite simple actually. Our 4 main characters are Ritsuka, Mafuyu, Haruki, and Akihiko. All the before mentioned boys are musicians who play in a band together aside from Mafuyu. However, Ritsuka, who used to be obsessed with playing music, seems to be losing his passion for it. He one day meets Mafuyu at school, who seems to be holding a guitar with a broken string. Mafuyu asks him to fix the strings for him, to which Ritsuka at first says no, but eventually gives in. From that point on, Mafuyu starts begging Ritsuka to teach him guitar, to which he repeatedly says no. After constant begging and being persistent with his requests, Ritsuka eventually gives in and agrees to teach him guitar. One day during a guitar lesson, Ritsuka asks Mafuyu if there's a song he wants to learn. Mafuyu says he has a song which repeatedly plays in his head all the time and he doesn't know the name of it, so the little chicken nugget decides to sing it to him and completely shakes his fragile, virgin heart. From that point on, Ritsuka tries to get Mafuyu to sing in his band. Mafuyu says no at first, but after a confrontation from Ritsuka, he eventually gives in. So now we have our 4 band members. The other important things that occur derive from the relationships between our 4 main characters because Ritsuka likes Mafuyu, Mafuyu likes Ritsuka, Haruki likes Akihiko, and Akihiko may or may not like Haruki but just sort of teases him at the moment because he's still sleeping with his hot emo looking but not actually emo ex-boyfriend. So that's where the yaoi part of the show comes in. Basically, our 4 main characters are all crushing on someone, but no one wants to admit their feelings, either because of their past experiences or because they're an idiot like Ritsuka. But he's an idiot in a good way, because we all love an adorable idiot. But anyways, that's a long enough plot summary for you to get the gist of the show. So as I did from my last video, I'm more or less going to stick with the same sort of format that I used, which is breaking up my arguments and claims into 3 or 4 major bullet points and going into each of them in detail. But it's going to be slightly different from the last video because instead of just using the categories of plot, characters, etc., this time each of the points is basically a reason as to why I like the show or a category that I think it excels in. So I think I've rambled on long enough. Let's get on to bullet point number 1, shall we? So my first point that I would like to bring to people's attention is the overall theme of dealing with loss and learning how to move forward. The way they handle this theme in particular is something that really stood out to me because losing people, whether through death or relationships that ended in a complete disaster, is something I've had to deal with quite a bit myself. It's not easy to just wake up one day and say, I'm over this person or I'm over what happened, and be able to go about your day. It is something that impacts you so heavily that to just wake up in the morning and be able to do normal things like go to school or work without completely falling apart is a huge accomplishment. So why am I bringing up my depressing past at this point in time? Well, I find my experience with this topic ties in quite well with the theme of coping with the idea of losing someone, confronting your feelings, accepting them for what they are, and trying to move on to something or someone or even many people who are actually a positive influence in your life. Before the events of the story took place, Mafuyu was involved in a relationship with his childhood best friend Yuki Yoshida. One day Mafuyu and Yuki got into an argument and shortly after that argument, Yuki committed suicide. Seeing the person Mafuyu was in love with disappear in front of your eyes broke him as a person, and as a result, his already introverted and quiet personality became even more introverted and quiet. He was stuck in the past, unable to go on with his life because of what happened. Once he met Ritsuka, everything changed. Ritsuka was able to push him out of the fog and open his eyes to another world that he could become a part of. Not just in terms of being able to have another romantic relationship with another person, but also he introduced him to the world of music. Music was an outlet that Mafuyu was able to use to channel all those feelings, all those past experiences, and create something new and unique with them. Whenever people come to me and ask me for advice on how to get over someone, how to handle losing someone who was once important to you, how do you get over those feelings? Well, one of the first things I always mention is to channel all those feelings of frustration, sorrow, regret, and anger into something more positive. If there's a hobby you love or something something you're interested in doing, then just do it and channel all those feelings into making something that makes you feel good about yourself. Because just sitting around drowning in a pool of your own sorrows won't do anyone, especially not yourself, any good. The theme of loss also applies to Akihiko in a sense because he continues to hang on to his relationship with Ugetsu by an extremely thin thread. Even though the relationship continues to deteriorate as they both move forward with their lives, they still choose to hang on to it, because hanging on to what used to be is sometimes easier than letting go and venturing off into the unknown. They both eventually come to the realization in the manga that this merry-go-round that they refuse to get off of needs to come to a stop, and they both need to experience new things and new people instead of just continuing to go around in this exact same circle. In the anime, well, we haven't gotten to that yet, and they're still trying to make do with the remains of what used to be a loving relationship that is no longer what it once was. Now I would like to move on to my second point, which would be, it's a yaoi anime. Oh, it's definitely a yaoi anime, but it doesn't feel like one. As someone who actually really enjoys the yaoi genre for what it is, the fact that Given is so different from the others that exist within that genre is a breath of fresh air. What I mean is, in your typical yaoi, the plot is very driven by the fact that one character wants to sleep with another character, and most of the time that leads to an assault scene or just a very awkward segue into the characters actually doing sexual acts on screen with each other. I notice most of the time there's a very forceful and out-of-the-blue love confession by one of the two parties within the first or second episode of the show. Like, sometimes there's little to no history of these characters actually knowing or interacting with each other outside of a casual setting like a school or a work environment. And they just come out of the blue like, "I have always loved you, you are my soulmate." And then that may or may not be followed up by one or both of the characters trying to touch each other awkwardly, but hey, it's a yaoi. We expect the characters to act in this manner, so we don't really question it all that much. And Given, like, yes, you have characters touching each other, kissing, teasing, even sleeping with each other. But each and every relationship is explained in detail and tend to have a history to back it up. You have an entire episode explaining Mafuyu and Yuki's relationship. You have half an episode explaining how Akihiko and Ugetsu got together, and they're not even the main focus of the show. And as for our main characters, it took 7 episodes for Ritsuka to admit he was in love with Mafuyu, and it wasn't until episode 9 where they actually kissed for the first time. And it took the whole goddamn season for the two of them to admit that their feelings were mutual. See what I mean? That is character development right there. You see a relationship that progressed naturally, a relationship that started out as a seed within the ground, gave it water and time to grow, and eventually it blossomed into a beautiful gay romance that makes me want to cry. If Ritsuka tried to, in Akihiko's words, put his hands on Mafuyu from the get-go, then I probably wouldn't praise this show as much as I do. And I do believe that there's a time and a place for those kinds of romances where it just burns bright and explodes into fireworks from the very beginning. Like Say I Love You is one of my favorite romance animes ever, and the couple in that show got together in episode 1. But that is not this show, and I'm really glad it isn't, because one of the main themes of this show is acknowledging your feelings and deciding how you're going to act upon them. So the slow and steady pace is something that I find really benefits the story in the end. And now, onto my last point, and I think this is the thing that Given is best known for, and that would be the music. Now, as someone who used to play bass and guitar in the past, and had many failed attempts at trying to get a band together, the music is a major aspect of the show that appealed to me quite a bit. First and foremost, I'm referring to the music written and performed by our 4 main characters. Now, I'm not saying this from a biased perspective, because even when I like something, if it does something trash, I'm not afraid to call it trash. But the music in this show is actually the furthest thing from trash. It's actually pretty amazing. I kid you not, right after I heard Fuyu no Hanashi for the first time, I immediately searched the internet for a full version, added it to my playlist, and had it on replay for a week. I didn't fall in love with it because it's a song associated with a show that I'm currently obsessed with, but it sounds exactly like the kind of alternative rock that I used to listen to day in and day out. It's exactly my cup of tea. So I guess some of you will point out that going on about how the music in this show is fucking great is rather subjective. So I guess you'll just have to listen to it for yourself and develop your own opinion on it. But there's no harm in giving my own opinion, I guess. Same goes for the opening and ending. The ending song is actually sung by Mafuyu's voice actor, and I'm obsessed with it, and it's a lot softer, which I also really like. But yeah, if you're not like me, and you really don't like that alternative rock sound, then yeah, it might not appeal to you all that much. And at that point, you'll have to judge the show based on other criteria like plot, characters, visuals, art style, etc. Also the OST, I like that as well. The acoustic music that plays during some of the softer scenes is quite lovely and adds a majestic sort of ambiance to it. Also, it provides a nice contrast compared to the more high energy songs from when the band is performing or jamming in the studio. So I'll be leaving links to Fuyo no Hanashi as well as the opening and ending songs in the description below. So I encourage you to go check those out for yourself. So just to conclude, I kind of lied when I said Attack on Titan was my favorite anime. Well, it wasn't really a lie, it's just that I had two favorites, Attack on Titan and Given. I knew I had to make a video on this show since it basically has taken over my life since I watched the very first episode back in July. It took two things I love and adore, music and romance, and turned it into something so beautifully written, aesthetically pleasing, and euphoric to listen to. And there are very few anime out there that can make me feel all those sensations at once. So if you haven't watched Given yet because you've made it this far into the video and you avoided the spoiler warning, I highly encourage you to go watch it. So that is basically it. This turned out to be a longer video than I expected it to be. I figured since the anime is short at only 11 episodes, I could just ramble on about each of the categories I mentioned and still keep it at a rather decent length. But yeah, I am very talkative when it comes to this show. But that aside, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if there's any other shows you would like me to talk about, I have a list linked in the description below. It's not only anime shows that I've watched, but also TV shows, movies, even Broadway plays. But for the moment, I would only be sticking with anime, and maybe another day I'll venture off into different media. So that seems like a pretty good place to end it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day.